Um, Welcome to the first video for magazine class. It's going to be the first in a series of lectures I'll be giving to you that have been recorded so you can watch them at any speed you would like and still understand me. I'm going to start on the homepage here for momentumpress.com, and I have a separate link for the magazine class. And if you click on that magazine link, it will take you to this page, and you'll have a week by week review of what will be going on in class, what we'll be doing for homework, and any applicable resources and links. I'm going to be starting off this lecture by going over a weekly outline for class um, to show you what we'll be covering this quarter. And I'll also be talking about reviewing things that we did over the summer, including talking about editorial order, and general magazine page sizes, common ad sizes, and some things that you should be deciding and thinking about before we actually design starting next week. So I'll start on page 1 right here. So week by week, week 1, which is today, we'll be reviewing editorial order for mainstream magazines, talking about advertising sizes, common ad placement for your class project. And after this video, if you have any questions of this basic review, you can feel free to ask me when we reconvene. And then we'll be talking about reviewing and vetting body text, making and using flat plans, which a flat plan is a way that magazines use to order their content to get the idea of pacing and where articles and ads will go in their magazine. And then finally, we'll be creating timelines for your deliverables for your magazine for the quarter. Next week, I'll introduce part 1 of a series of recipes that you can use to help manage a big working project like a magazine. Whenever I have a big project, it's good to think about how to tackle the project and come up with systems to make a lot of the decisions easier and stay within brand. And throughout this course, I'll be introducing a few different techniques to create recipes for long projects or big projects. And the first recipe I'll be introducing next week is deconstructing your mood board. And this not only could be used for magazines, but for branding or for packaging or for any other project like an environmental graphics, where you need to really understand what's happening in your mood board so that you create something inspired by, but not necessarily directly taken from your mood board. And it's a way to discover and create a recipe for tone for your brand. And in the second part of class, we'll be talking about creating taglines for your magazine's brand. Week 3, we'll be going over the elements of a typical feature article, which is something that we covered last quarter in the spring, but I wanted to review it again. We'll be reviewing your taglines for your magazine's brand. We'll be talking about how to determine the number of columns to choose for your articles, and I'll show you a video on customizing headlines to make them a little bit more interesting than the typed out default that is an option. And then I'll introduce a second design recipe, which will be creating a series of article opening paragraphs that show a range of tone that fits your mood board, fits in your brand tone, but gives you a range that you can work with. It's sort of like a design sampler. And finally, I'll do a demo on how to set up your InDesign documents, which will include setting up or reviewing how to set up a baseline grid and setting up your body copy paragraph styles. Week 4, I'll introduce a new recipe for tackling this big project. And that recipe will be how to flow in body text and set up character and paragraph styles and creating pull quotes. Week 5, I will be talking about how typical magazine companies are structured, who's on the team and what are their job positions and how it's different in our classroom. And then we'll jump into masthead design. And a masthead is another name of for your magazine's logo or nameplate. And we'll be doing some brainstorming on how to create nameplates. And then there'll be a small review on a letter from the editor with masthead information as well. Week 6 will be moving on to magazine covers, cover terminology, different cover types, and barcodes. We'll then also talk about what is useful to have to create a table of contents and a masthead page. And I'll be doing a demo for setting up your magazine cover in InDesign. And finally, I'll be sharing some resources that students have used in the past to create digital comps, not only for their covers, but for their entire magazine, for their final presentations for their portfolios. Week 7, I'm inviting alumni in to have one-on-one feedback sessions for your work in progress. In the past, these have gone really well, and students have gotten a lot of good information from alumni because it's a fresh pair of eyes to look at your work. And then you'll have a check-in with me afterwards in case you have any questions or need extra advice along the way. And also, I'll have a series of videos that Ed did for how to print and bind your magazines on the 5th floor to create end of quarter comps for us to review. Week 8, I'll be introducing the branding class and the client list where you'll be able to start going out and collect potential clients y'all might want to work on for winter quarter. Week 9 is a holiday week, so I'm not sure what days my classes will fall on, where I believe it's a Monday, Friday, so I'm designated that week for a lab week or holiday, depending on when the class lands. Week 10, I'll be spending some time talking about magazine brands and magazine brand channels, what media platforms that magazines use to help cross-promote their brands. And I will also talk a bit about ad specs for print and digital media, and give a couple of links and videos to help you with the beginning of microtypography, which is aligning your body text to the baseline grid, and microtype cheat sheets. Week 11, we'll vote on our branding clients, so you'll know before winter quarter who you'll be potentially working on for winter quarter. And I'll be giving you information to help you with the presentations, which will be during finals week. Because we start our fall session on a Tuesday, finals week, week 12, starts on a Tuesday. So Monday's regular class day, and Tuesday through Thursday are the time slots for finals. So you'll be presenting during those finals time slots. So we'll have presentations in smaller groups. We'll have peer-to-peer reviews so you get some instant feedback from someone. And I'll also be going a little bit more in depth and answering questions on what we'll be doing for the branding homework over winter break to get ready for winter quarter. Okay. My office hours, if you need me this quarter, will be every day from 2 to 3 via Zoom or Slack, whichever you would prefer. And the best way to reach me is through Slack because I set up instant notifications, and I'll try to get back to you within the first 24 hours. I try to give priority to second-year students because right now you're probably thinking more about your portfolio, and I want to give y'all some extra help and guidance if you would like it. Okay, I'm gonna move on, and I'm going to review, let's open this up, common magazine sizes. I know that over summer quarter, I asked y'all to make paper folding dummies of potential sizes that students have used in the past that work with vendors to print off their magazines. and I wanted to talk about in the industry common magazine sizes and why they're set up that way. So in general, there are two magazine sizes that are very standard. There's one that's around 8 3/4 and 10 7/8. That's very standard. And then there's a digest size, which is usually smaller. It's around 5 3/8 by 8 3/8. And the digest size is usually more for literary magazines or long form content magazines like a Reader's Digest, because it's usually a 1 or 2 column structure for the magazine, and it's much better suited for longer reads. And if you take a look at this column on the right, you'll notice that, for example, if you take a look here under the Condé Nast is the parent brand, and they own quite a few magazines under their brand umbrella. And you'll see right here that all their magazines are the same size. And one of the reasons why that is because the parent company, this conglomerate, goes to their preferred vendor and says, hey, we can give you hundreds of thousands of print runs if you can cut us a deal on costs, because they want to definitely keep everything affordable. And then the vendor, the printer, will work with them to see what size that magazine can be that will give them the least amount of paper waste. So what's the maximum size? And that way they can keep the cost per unit down and get the most pages out of each parent size sheet. And so you'll see that depending on who they're working with their vendor, magazines will be specific sizes. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go beyond those sizes. You can. It's just going to cost you more because there'll be more paper waste depending on the vendor you will use. So this one explains that. The bigger the magazine or the smaller the magazine, usually the bigger the magazine, the more expensive it is. The smaller, you can usually get more pages out. But depending on the size, it could also not be as cost effective. And then one thing to note, not only for printing your magazines out on the 5th floor, but also when you work with vendors, the way magazines are printed, it's often sheet fed, which means the sheet of paper gets fed through the press and then flipped and turned and printed on the backside. And when they fold down the sheet for binding and printing, the pages are set up on the printer in position in a way that they're in sections of 1 through 4 pages. So how this is important for the designer is that when you design your magazine, usually you'll be speaking with the vendor and you might ask them, does my magazine need to be divisible by a certain amount? And oftentimes, like 99.9% of the times, the magazine number of pages has to be divisible by 4. And that's really important because when they fold and bind their magazine, you don't want to have any blank pages or not enough pages to complete the section when it gets folded and bound. So you'll have magazines that could be 16 pages, 32 pages, 48 pages, as long as it's divisible by 4. Some of the things that designers have to think about is paper stock when they're working with vendors. And most magazines are printed on a glossy paper stock, usually very thin paper, usually around 50 to 60 pound. And the cover stock is usually, for the cover, is usually a heavier weight paper called the cover stock paper. And that's usually around 100 pounds, 100-pound text, or even maybe a 50 or 60 pound cover. And usually they're glossy. A lot of niche magazines tend to go with uncoated stock, which means it doesn't have this sheen or coating on it. And the colors on the uncoated stock tend to be darker and richer. And the paper texture itself is a little more tactile. It's called tooth, so you can choose a paper that has a little bit more tooth to it, a little more texture to it, to give a certain look and feel. Now, this is a little side fact. I don't know if I told you this last year, but I love this, that with paperweight, this poundage came about because if you took a ream of parent-size sheets of a specific thickness, and you took 500 of those sheets and put them on a scale, what its basis weight would be determines the poundage of the paper stock. So if you had a 100-pound text weight paper, you take 500 sheets of that paper of the parent size sheet, put it on a scale, and it'll weigh 100 pounds. So, and that's the thickness of the paper. It's 100 pounds. I find that fascinating. Moving on, for bindery, there's two main types for magazine bindery. The first is called saddle stitch, where you take one section of sheets that are folded in half, and then two staples are put right through the spine, and that's how it's bound. And usually the cover sheet is a separate sheet that's slightly heavier to protect the inside text block. And these are often done for magazines that are 48 pages or less, or magazine zines. It's very economical, it's very easy, very fast. Most mainstream magazines and quite a few niche magazines are perfect bound, which means that you have a series of text weight pages for the body that are put together, and the spine is shaved off and glue is added to the spine, and then another heavier sheet is glued to the spine and wrapped around the body text, and that is called perfect bound. And that's what we'll be doing on the 5th floor, and that's what we'll be doing for most of your magazines when you go to print with one of the vendors. These are the vendors that most students have used in the past. Depending on the size of your magazine, if you chose 8.5 by 11, you'll probably be going through Blurb. If you chose 8.25 by 10.75 or digest size, you could go through MagCloud. And MagCloud was recently bought out by Blurb, so they look like two independent companies, but they're really owned by the same parent company. And then Mixam has quite a few sizes, and you might also be able to print with them. And they offer a slight variety of paper stocks. Here we go. So some of the things I'd like you to have decided definitely by the end of today, if you haven't done so over the summer, is to choose your paper size and choose which vendor you'll be going with. Most magazines have some form of advertising to help sustain the magazine. These are common ad sizes that show up in magazines. Most of my students, I'd say almost 100% of them, chose when they did advertisements to do full page because it was the easiest to design around. And when they chose advertisements, they often put at least 5 in. One ad for the back cover, and then 1 ad, 2 ads at the very beginning of their magazine, and 2 ads at the very end of their magazine. And some students, when they said they wanted more ads to support their magazine subscription price to make it more affordable, when they worked on their flat plan, which is what you'll be working on this week, they added ad space in their flat plan so they could plan ahead as to how many ads they would need and where they would go. The last thing I want to review before I show you some samples is I want to go through quickly a quick review of editorial order. This summer I gave you a more extensive PDF that went into details about each section and gave you some highlights or pointers about each section. But I want to quickly review it here so that when we end our video and come back to class, if you recall the editorial order and if you have any questions for me, you can remember some of the things that are part of this so that we can discuss it together in class. So for most magazines, there are key parts to a magazine. There are covers. There's usually some form of advertising. There is a table of contents and the masthead page, which has information about who is participating and contributing to the magazine. There's a letter from the editor, which talks about what the magazine issue is about and the magazine brand. There's the front of book, which is usually through the point of view of the magazine's brand. And so it will have repeating sections in it, like the letter from the editor. It might have viewer feedback. It might have a style section or a celebrity section or short articles or information about politics or society filtered through the point of view of the magazine. There'll be some main feature articles, which is the crux of why people will be buying that particular magazine. Sometimes these articles are longer. They don't always have to be. Sometimes they could be photo essays, so they don't always have to be something that's read for content. It's just something that will really resonate with a lot of your readers. And then finally, the back of book. Oftentimes in American magazines, this is used for overflow, for when you can't fit the entire article in the feature well. But it can also contain smaller 1 to 2 page information like reviews or calendars or essays or hot lists or horoscopes, anything that might be popular in the magazine. Sometimes it could be recipes or a Q&A section or a DIY section. Finally, the last page is usually a witty little op-ed piece, followed by an ad, and then the back cover, which is either branded, that is like from the front cover to the back cover, so it looks like almost like a landscape image or something that's branded within the voice and tone of the magazine, or it's more ad space. The last thing I'd like to do before I show you samples is to have you have it clear in your head and to make sure that you have all of these things done before we proceed into next week. If you don't have it already, I really would like you to nail down your magazine size. For next week, I want you to complete your flat plan so that you'll have a good idea of how many pages you'll have for your magazine. You'll know your rough order of your magazine, and if you have ads, you'll know roughly where they'll be placed. It'll also give you an opportunity to edit down or add content if you need it. The third thing is to make sure you clearly define or understand your reader personas. Especially if you need to generate more content, it's a good resource to think about. I'd like you to start playing with your brand concept next week, which is your brand tagline. And we'll make sure you have clear vision of your mood board. So those are some key things we're going to be wrapping up and figuring out over week 1 and week 2. So but by week 3, you'll be ready to hit the ground running and truly designing your brand with a little bit more knowledge than you have even right now. The last thing I wanted to show is hopefully going to inspire you to get excited about this quarter. This is where you probably are today. Hopefully you have all this information ready to go. You'll have a working title for your magazine and maybe the starting of a tagline or what it's about. You'll have a short synopsis. You'll have your reader personas written out and ready to be reviewed by me. You'll have your mood boards, and that will be ready to be reviewed peer-to-peer or with me over the next couple of weeks. And then by the end of the quarter, instead of having PDF files or formal presentations on the overhead projector, most likely will be online and we'll be viewing each other's work through Google Slides. So I set up a Google slide for each class, and in that classroom, here's the presentation template. So all you would need to do are copy and make duplicates of the following pages. The first for yourself, and add your name, the title of your magazine, your genre, like it's a lifestyle magazine, and your brand tagline. Page 2 of your presentation will be your short synopsis of what your magazine will cover. Slide 3, maybe 4 and 5, depending on how many reader personas and how you set it up, will have your general audience and your personas. The next couple of slides will be your mood boards. The slide after that will be your original flat plan. The slide after that will be your cover design and your TOC. You'll have one of your front of book articles, one of your feature layouts, one of your back of book articles, and then you'll be done. Here's some of the samples of what those presentations looked like. This was done by Elise. She did a magazine called Next Gen. It was a tween lifestyle magazine, and her tagline was "Things Sorta Explained," because she wanted to be more peer-to-peer advice, but good advice, something that parents would approve of, but also in a conversational, non-patronizing way from teens to teens. Her synopsis, her personas, her mood board, her flat plan, which we'll be talking about later on today, her cover, which is completely branded front and back, her contents page, and here's her front of book article. Feature well, and back of book. This is Michael's. He did a magazine called Transport, and his tagline was "Sights and Sounds for the Eclectic Soul." And it was about music lovers and curious travelers. And he had this really interesting thing where you could use your phone and Spotify with a QR code to actually listen to the music while you're reading the magazine. Here's his audience. Here's his mood board, his flat plan, cover, table of contents, front of book, feature well. Oh, I think that was back of book. Sorry, that was Michael. This was Kira. Kira started her project in the summer where she did all of her own illustrations and wrote all of her own content, I believe. And she did a book for kids and young adults, educational, and it's about climate and the world and talking about serious issues. And it was called Echo, and her tagline was "Let's explore a changing world." And so this is a synopsis. And here are personas. her mood board, and her flat plan. She went above and beyond. You do not need to have a flat plan that's this detailed, but that was her desire. And here's her cover design illustration. Here's her cover, and it was branded front and back. And here's her magazine. With hand lettering and illustration. And she won an Addy for this. I'm very proud of my students. Y'all do such good work. And for her, she included stickers and little fun interactive items that she user tested on my kids and some other kids too. This was Dylan's, and Dylan decided to create a magazine for a blog that was already existing called Wait But Why. And his tagline was simplifying the complex for the curious. And there was all these great articles, and he did custom layouts and illustrations for all of the work. And these are his reader personas. His mood board, illustration style, and layout style. His flat plan. And then here's his cover, his table of contents, and here's his magazine. And he started his illustrations. He did his illustrations, I believe, in Mark's class as a special topics project where he was learning, I think, he was learning Procreate simultaneously, so that was his skills he was learning, and then applying them as the quarter went on. This is Ellie's. And this is called Shift, Positive News Working Solutions. And her synopsis, her personas, her mood board, her flat plan. Her cover is branded, but her back cover is advertising. And here's her masthead page, TOC. And here's some of her articles. And she did her own custom infographics for her magazine as well. There's a couple more. Try to go a little faster. I just love these. I hope you do too. I just think they're phenomenal. All of y'all, you're gonna do a great job. So here's Christine. She did a magazine called 1/1, Finding Harmony in the Everyday. And this is her synopsis, her mood board, her reader personas, her flat plan. What I love about her magazine is she wanted to be more accessible to more cultures, and so she had it. She did the whole magazine, or almost the whole magazine, in 2 languages, and the design is simple and beautiful. It's just very elegant, and it just flows together. She chose her type really well. They just work nicely together. This is Chris's. It's called Stilo, and it's about urban dance styles and culture. Chris he is really into dance, and I think is an instructor, and he participates a lot at Acid Monkeys, and so he wanted to create a magazine about something he loved, and so loves dance. And these are his personas, his mood board, his flat plan. That's his cover and his contents page. And here's some of his articles. He reworked this a lot spring quarter. It was pretty solid at the end of fall quarter, but he reworked some of these magazine articles and really top notch. It looked really good when it was done. And here's the final one for today. This is called Mainframe. It's innovations in research and development, and this was done by Cam. And here's his reader personas. And he created a series of glyphs and graphics that are unique to his magazine, little universal icons. And here's his mood board and flat plan, cover, TOC, and layout. Okay, when we reconvene after you watch this video, I would love to see if you have any questions about what we're covering this quarter, if you have any questions about editorial order, or if you need any help or suggestions about choosing sizes at this point. Okay, so I'll see you back in class in a few minutes.